Hello, everyone, and welcome to the presentation, Poetry Close Reading. Today's presentation features a work by Emily Dickinson, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, number 591. Interestingly, Dickinson's poems were not titled. They were numbered, and she wrote more than 1,800 poems, and that's how they all were. In fact, also interesting, only 10 of her poems were published during her life. So this is one of the many that was published after her death in 1886. By the way, she was born in 1830. She lived and worked in Amherst, Massachusetts. Regardless of how good Miss Dickinson's work is, today's presentation is not so much about her poem as it is about how to do a close reading of a poem, any poem, how to do a critical analysis. And we're just using hers as an example, and a fine one it is. So the first step, what do you do first if you want to critically analyze a poem? You read it closely. How do you do a close reading? Guess what? You read it. That's the first step. Second, read it again. Read it slowly. Read it deliberately. Read it closely. After that, number 3, read it once again. Read it aloud. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see. Now, in case you haven't guessed it, the next thing that you do with your poem to conduct a close reading is read it again. This time, though, you're going to read it with a pencil in your hand. You're going to annotate. Annotate means to take notes, but actually it's more than that. Annotate could mean to underline. It could mean to circle important terms. It could mean to, what in the world does that mean? Or, oh my goodness, look at that. Maybe it could, a smiley face when the fly shows up. Or what about a frowny face when the lady dies? Well, I'm assuming it's a lady, but, we don't really have any indication that it is, other than the fact that the author is a female, but is the character in her poem a female? We're not sure. I've always thought it was, but that's just me and my interpretation. So you can write notes in the margin. You can write notes down here. You can draw, oh my goodness, a star. You can circle. Okay, right? So write it up, mark it up, make it yours, write your questions on it. Whatever you want to do, do it. Now, the next thing is, when you're reading this line by line and word by word, is you're going to pay attention to the facts and the details. What's going on here? Now, I think it's pretty obvious. There's a lady. Well, there you go with my lady again. There's a person on her. Just let me stick with the lady because that's what I think it is. And I've always thought that it was actually Emily Dickinson, because death is one of her themes that, it's one of her common themes. And I'm not saying she was obsessed by it, but she seemed to have a real interesting way of looking at one of life's great mysteries. But it's obvious that the lady is on her deathbed, that the family and friends are gathered around, they're crying, and she's about to go meet her maker, and this fly comes between her and the light, and there's that, the metaphysical light at the end of the tunnel. Go towards the light, and then there's the just literal light of the window, and the fly comes in between. I don't think it lands anywhere because it's buzzing around, uncertain, stumbling buzz, and there's the use of the buzz onomatopoeia, which we'll get to that in just a second about her word choice. But what's going on here? All right, so it's a lady on her deathbed, right? And then also look at the structure. Now, what do we have? Well, these things are lines. Yeah, you probably know that. These things are stanzas. So we have 4 stanzas of 4 lines each. So there's a pattern, isn't there? What else can we see about this? Well, she uses these dashes a lot. And she also capitalizes words like just in the middle of sentences, which we don't do. Now, why does she do that? Well, first of all, I Googled this actually, and that's something they did back in the 1800s, is when they wanted to emphasize something, is they capitalized it. You know how like we write things in all caps when we're tweeting or or on social media? Well, that was the way they did it. Now, she also, I feel certain, did it for a pause while you're reading it, like to pause. I willed my keepsakes, pause, signed away what portion of me be assignable, pause. And then it was there interposed a fly, pause. Okay, I like that. Now, they also serve as bridges, obviously, right? Like, look, this one here takes you from assignable on to the next phrase. Okay, all right, fine. Now, then what else stands out? We talked a little bit about this. Who's speaking? Is it the poetess herself? Is it a character she's created? Is there anything confusing to you? I always thought this part was a little bit confusing. Had wrung them dry. The eyes around had wrung. It's the eyes had wrung them dry. I thought something had wrung the eyes dry. So anyway, I'm still working with that one in my head. Now, look, what about the rhythm and the meter, right? And, it does certainly have a rhythm, doesn't it? And the meter, dig this. This is, I heard a fly buzz when I died. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The stillness in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 8, 6, 8, 6, 8, 6, 8, 6. That's called common meter. And now it's not written in stone, and it's not going to be, so like this one is not 6. 1, 2, 3, gathering firm. There's 7. But this is still considered a common meter of poem. And by the way, which is very common for songs today, pop songs, rock songs, and so forth. Now, also, notice her choice of words. Look how she repeats stillness, stillness. I think it's interesting between the heaves of storm. Heaves, that's violent. It's a word that connotes violence. The onset, for that last onset. That's a real interesting word to use for the arrival of death, because onset means to commence, to get on with something. And we usually think of death as the end of our journey, right? But I'm not sure that she is using it that way. That's interesting too. And then the fly interposed. That's an interesting choice of words as well. Then the buzz, I mentioned, I think, onomatopoeia. So I think it's some interesting use of language, and especially the light, the metaphysical light, and then the actual light. And then I could not see, and of course, then she dies. But why would the poet choose those words and not others? These sentences, some poems, the sentences are jagged and rough, and these are fairly smooth. I think I heard a fly buzz when I died. They're kind of abrupt too, though, aren't they? Now, does the poem produce certain emotions or feelings? Now, that's a good one. That's a real good one, and there's a certain sadness here. I mean, it's her deathbed, and people are gathered around crying, and she's about to breathe her last. There's a certain sadness, but is the narrator forget the narrator? Is the person lying in the bed? Is she afraid of dying? I'm not sure that she is. And what about the juxtaposition of one of life's greatest mysteries? The mystery of death, of what's next, and actually one of life's most dreaded events that is bound to happen to everyone, but yet juxtaposing it against this normal, something as trivial and happenstance as a housefly buzzing around, and at least for a fleeting moment, that was just as important as this passing from the threshold of life to death. Did the presence of the fly give some comfort and respite before the coming storm? What do you think?